I joined a team in my high school that traveled often to away tournaments. I had an older coach who was a woman, and we were very close. My other coach, named Michael, was about a 30-year-old man with a wife and infant son. He seemed very friendly, and always was willing to help us before tournament and with one-on-one sessions. We never got any creepy vibes from him, and we used to joke in a rather stupid and childish way that if he wasn't married, he might be gay. I was particularly successful on the team, but as a 15-year-old girl I had stupid issues, and sometimes I would talk to my friends on the team about them. For some reason, Michael had my phone number, presumably for team updates and whatnot. He started by just texting me about my performance, the team's performance, etc. Then, the texting became more casual and friendly, like, "Hey, what's up?" or "What do you have going on today?" Warning signals should have gone off immediately, but I was 15, naive, and willing to see the best in people. My mom noticed something was off, and she would ask me why I kept texting my coach so frequently. I told her he was just friendly, but she remained suspicious. It wasn't as though I particularly enjoyed the texting, but I felt obligated because he was my coach, and I didn't want to be rude and have him treat me unfairly for doing so. I would get bored fairly quickly, though, and stop replying. Noticing this, he would send me 4 to 5 messages in a row, apologizing for surpassing his limit, and for making me feel uncomfortable. I would of course feel bad and say that wasn't the case, which actually it was. After a while, the conversation turned strange. He was mentioning things like getting coffee outside of team practices, and say he was willing to do whatever to help me win. One weekend, my team had an away trip for a 2-day tournament at a town several hours away, and so we had to stay a night at a hotel in town. During the tournament, Michael was around me frequently, and even came to watch my performances, which was odd because he was usually supposed to be doing something else with my other coach. With him watching me with his beady eyes, my performance wasn't as good as usual, and I didn't do well. My stress was visible to other team members when I returned, and my friend gave me a pointed look, as if asking, "Why was he watching your round?" Michael texted me the first night after the tournament, and suggested working out together to de-stress. At other tournaments before, the entire team would go swimming in the pool, and he would join us in the hot tub sometimes, which always made me a little uncomfortable. Working out just the two of us gave me bad vibes, and I declined, saying that I would rather just sleep and get some rest, instead of working out. He suggested I come up to his room to relax, and that he can give me a massage. Warning bells went off immediately, but I, being the idiot that I was, didn't immediately go to my older coach and tell her what was going on. I was with other girls in a room, and I didn't tell them either, even though I now realize I should have. He continued texting me for a while afterwards, but I would make some excuse as to why I couldn't talk. I think he realized soon after that he had messed up big time, and just stopped trying to talk to me. Several months later, I get a phone call from my coach in the middle of the night. She tells me that Michael has been arrested after his wife checked his phone and found out he had been having sex with a 14-year-old girl on our team. Statutory rape. My coach was frantic and asking me whether he had tried to do anything with me, and I told her the story. It turns out that there were several other girls on the team, all minors, that he had been talking to and offering help. He's in prison for the next 10 years. I talked to my best friend, and he apparently had been doing the same to her, but she didn't tell me because she was scared. Anyways, moral of the story: if someone twice your age is asking you to come into his hotel room when you're a minor, you probably shouldn't go meet him. Thank God I didn't. The other day, I realized that before I moved away from Tennessee to come to college, I had experienced a number of break-ins. Having a person I don't know in my personal space is my biggest pet peeve, and I guess, in a sense, is also a fear of mine. When I lived alone, I wouldn't invite people over without knowing them for a period of time. Now that I have a roommate, I don't want him coming into my room without telling me first. I never let my friends bring over people I didn't know when I lived with my parents. You get the idea. I'm just extremely territorial over the places I call home. Because of this, the fear of someone breaking into my home has been one of my greatest since I can remember. I've always been acutely aware of the fact that it is possible for it to happen. These are my several experiences with people breaking into houses I lived in growing up. The first attempted break-in I can remember was when I was about 6 or 7. It was just me, my mom, and my sister living in our family home. The first house I remember ever living in. Me and my sister got in the habit of always sleeping in my mom's bed with her, since it was a king and my dad had moved out. On a couple of different occasions, we would wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone jamming metal into the deadbolt of our front door. Me and my sister would think it was our dad, unusual for him to be coming over so late, but not too out of the ordinary since he was very much still involved in our lives. When the noise continued, accompanied with the handle violently being turned, we would wake up our mom terrified. My mom would run down the stairs, yell through the door about calling the police. Then we'd check outside to find no one there. More than likely they darted around the side of our house. I can't recall if she ever followed up with a police call. I was too young and probably back asleep by that point if she did. One morning though, we did wake up to find our garage door pried open and our riding lawnmower's tires slashed. We assumed it was our neighbors trying to get us to move, since our house had just gotten rebuilt from burning down. We had sent our neighbor to prison a year earlier for attacking my parents and extended family with an axe, and my neighbors who lived in the house after them had just molested my sister. Maybe more on all this in a different post. So, we were apparently nothing but trouble to the rest of the neighborhood, and it was obvious they wanted us gone. An actual break-in happened when I was in 7th grade, and had finally started staying by myself for a few hours after school, while my mom finished at her job and my sister attended marching band practice. We had moved 2 times since the attempted break-in at this point, to a much more affluent part of Tennessee. Barely any crime. The eventual domestic dispute that involved the gun and the entire Port Police Department that would be gossiped for months afterwards. I always got spooked staying by myself at this point. So much so, some days I would leave my house and walk to the park because I was too afraid of any weird noise to stay at home. One afternoon, I had been home for about an hour and was watching TV with my cat and dog, probably shoving food in my face, when my animals ran to the foot of the stairs. My dog was running at the bottom half, panting, like someone was up there. Even my cat, who thought she was a dog, was sheepishly walking up the stairs to check out what was going on. I grabbed the house phone, about to book it out the door when I heard the glass door in my mom's bedroom slam open and rattle the floor. My dog went fucking nuts and ran up and down the stairs barking and growling. I heard a couple of footsteps in my mom's bedroom, and then I heard running back out the direction of the glass doors. I was freaking out, unable to move because my biggest fear finally happened to me. After a while, I eventually went upstairs to peek around. Not a soul was up there. My mom's glass doors were wide open. What's weird about this is that she never thought to lock them, because outside the glass doors was a balcony that was more like an outdoor hallway without a roof, leading to our attic above the garage. It also had a 6 feet tall wooden fence around it to keep the neighbors who had the same thing from seeing in. The person who broke in would have had to have jumped onto our garage and then scaled it to get to where he could access my mom's room. There was a second incident at this house that we believe to have been an attempted break-in. I was still in 7th grade, and while walking home from the bus stop, my dog happily bounded up to me. This was strange because he was always kept inside unless someone was home. When I got to my house, the front door and the back door were wide open. The only thing out of place was a chair that looked like it had been knocked over. We think a neighbor saw someone come into the house, and when they went to talk to them, the intruder must have bolted out the back door, knocking down the chair. We never found out though. The house I lived in my freshman year of high school had the most break-ins, attempted and not, of anywhere I lived. On one occasion, my sister heard noise on her back deck, which was elevated about 10 or 15 feet off the ground. She opened the glass sliding door to see what it was, and she saw a man about 5 feet away, who immediately jumped off our deck and booked it down the hill our yard was on. One day I was high as hell, after smoking for one of the first times with a friend. We heard some rustling around the garage that was attached to the kitchen. We thought it was a raccoon, so we wanted to go out and watch it. When we opened the door, we barely caught a glimpse of a man running out of the garage and around the other side of the house, obviously spooked from hearing us unlock the door to come out. My bedroom in this house backed up against the stairwell, so I could hear every movement of someone coming up or down the stairs. My sister's room was on the other side of the stairs, and my mom's was right next to mine. My sister would always wake up around 5 to shower in the bathroom in her room. But I could always faintly hear it, so it would wake me up. I got accustomed to waking up a bit before she would, so I would just lie in bed and wait until it was time to actually get up. One morning, I was lying in bed waiting to hear my sister start her shower when I heard someone coming up the stairs. This was strange since I'm a light sleeper and would have heard my sister leaving her room earlier in the morning. This person was creeping up the stairs, slowly, almost methodically. It felt like eternity listening to them, making the way up. When they got to the top, I heard them rattle my sister's door handle, trying to open it. I'm assuming since it was a door right at the top of the stairs. Almost perfectly, my sister's alarm went off, and I could hear her start to get up. Whoever was at her door flew down the stairs, tripped, somehow managed to turn on the light in the stairway on their way down, knocked over our Christmas tree, and flew out the back door. I immediately ran downstairs to see if they were still around, and to close however they got in. My sister didn't say anything about the commotion until after her shower, when I was cleaning up the Christmas tree. I'm not entirely sure my mom believed me, since she didn't seem too worried and never contacted the police. On my 15th birthday, my sister and I were on our way home from marching band practice with her boyfriend, when my mom called us to tell us to get food and to eat it there. Through our massive kitchen windows, my mom could see a man walking around the backyard holding a gun, just sort of pacing around. My mom had called us from under the kitchen table where she was sitting with her shotgun, watching the guy. She called the police. We called the police. Not a single officer showed up at our house. The guy with the gun wandered away shortly after my mom called us, but she didn't want us coming home until an officer got there. Being teenagers, we got McDonald's, then just drove around our neighborhood, passing our house periodically to see if any police were outside. That night, one patrol car drove past our house. Not a single one went to the door. After that, a few cops seemed to be patrolling the area for a while, but nothing much happened afterwards. The house I lived in my senior year of high school was directly across the street from the one I lived in during 7th grade. I was basically living by myself at this point. My mom was married, and they spent all their time at their other house, an hour away. I was usually home alone, 5 out of 7 days a week, sometimes more. Occasionally I would have friends who had gotten kicked out living with me, or my boyfriend staying with me. One morning, me and my boyfriend were sleeping in late, probably hungover from whatever shenanigans the night before. My bedroom didn't have any windows, so I had no way to check what was going on outside. We heard really loud banging on the back door, but I ignored it. It continued for about 20 minutes until we heard the door get kicked in, which shook the whole one-story house. When we went outside, no one was to be found. The last attempted break-in incident was at the same house. I was about to graduate and move out to live with my sister. I was home alone, on my laptop in the front living room, when I heard loud knocking on the back door, similar to the knocks before. I was a little freaked out, but I tried to ignore it until I couldn't any longer. I tried sneaking around to see if I could catch a glimpse of who it was, but all the blinds were drawn. I turned on the hallway light, which illuminated my parents' room, which whoever it was could see. We had two back doors that led to the same porch the person was on, one on the back living room and one in my parents' room. Whoever was banging was a man who yelled for me to let him in, and that he saw the light switch. Then it went quiet, and I couldn't hear anything. I immediately called whoever I knew who lived the closest to have them come over. Then I spent the night at their place. I didn't call the cops for whatever teenage reason I had, and never told my parents about the last incident. I always just played it off as someone playing a cruel joke, since several of my friends made a big deal about the door getting kicked in. For reference, I moved 9 times in 8 years around the same area. That's why there's a lot of different houses. Thanks for reading all of this, and to the idiots who kept breaking in, or kept trying to break into my houses. Let's not meet. This happened when I was 18 and worked at Wendy's. We closed at 1 a.m., and I was often stuck working the closing shift. A guy I had been talking to, Corey, worked third shift at Walmart and took his lunch break at 2 a.m. A few times a week, I'd get off work and go grocery shopping at Walmart, while I waited for Corey to text me to tell me he was on lunch. Well, this particular night, I decided to bring my digital camera to work and print some pictures off at Walgreens across the street after my shift. I was meeting Corey for his lunch break, so I had some time to print pictures off for a scrapbook I was making. After work, I drove to Walgreens and sat at the photo kiosk. While I was trying to decide which pictures I wanted, I felt someone come up behind me. This wasn't super weird, since I knew most of the staff at Walgreens, but it wasn't anyone I knew. I looked over my shoulder and saw this guy just staring at my pictures on the screen. I said, "What's up?" thinking maybe he knew someone in my pictures. Creeper Man continues to stare and asks, "Is that your boyfriend?" I tell him no, those were my friends. In one of the pictures, I am kissing my friend Cody on the cheek. He points to it and says, "Well, he sure looks like your boyfriend." Again, I say no, that is my friend, and we were just taking a fun picture. Creepy Man continues to look over my shoulder, so I just try to ignore him. I used to compete in pageants, and one of my competition photos was now on the screen. "Have you ever thought about modeling?" he asks. I tell him no, pageants were just a hobby. He starts going on and on about how beautiful I am, and I still try to shrug it off. But then he puts his hand on my shoulder and asks me to print him off a picture of me. And I swear I thought I felt him sniff my hair. What the fuck? So I get my prints and tell him to have a good night. I decided it was best that I hang out in Walgreens rather than leave, in case he follows me. So I started browsing around the store, pretending to look for stuff I didn't even need. He tries to follow me, peeking around the corners, and then jumping back behind aisles when I make eye contact. This was really freaking me out. So I make my way to the front of the store, ready to make a run for it. He stands in front of me. He starts asking about all these horror movies, like Psycho and the like. I tell him no, I have not seen any of those movies, and decide it's time to get some help. I tell him I've just remembered I needed to ask the pharmacist a question about my new medication, he started to ask, "Oh, what medication?" And I cut him off and say goodnight again. I get to the back and lo and behold, my favorite pharmacist Sam is working. I used to be on several medications, so Sam knew who I was. I tell him he needed to act really engaged and stay at the window for a minute. He asks who the man is in the alley behind me, so I tell him what's up. Creeper decides to creep up closer and closer, and Sam tells him, "Sir, you're going to have to stay behind the line while I'm with a patient." Creeper decides to head back to the front of the store, so Sam and I chat as he does some paperwork. Eventually, Sam picks up the phone to call the cashier and asks if the weirdo is out of the store. She tells him yes and asks why. At this point, Sam actually puts his hand over the phone and is like, "My God, that's her brother." Then tells me he's joking. She feels horrible because she thought we were friends. He told her we were friends, and that he was giving me some privacy while I talked to the pharmacist. I wait a little longer before I go out to my car. The cashier watches me drive off. I decide to just drive around town in case I am being followed. This fucker already knew where I worked. Wendy's Polo with name tag. And I wasn't about to let him know where I lived. He actually came into Wendy's a few times after this, but my boss would let me hide in the back. So thanks, Sam the pharmacist. And creepy photo kiosk lurker. Let's not meet.